Okay, so what do you want to know? No, I'm glad to be here, and thank you guys so much for coming. I found out about the new inquiry because I read one of Rob's pieces. I read it and I thought, oh, this is a wise man. He's talking about things I think. I want to follow him in, so I followed him into Rachel and followed him. So I'm glad they're here because what happened when Jody said, let's do Q&A, she talked about, guys coming forward with the microphone, and I thought, I don't know how that's going to work so well. It'd be better if it kind of did an interview format. And I didn't know who to get to interview it. And of course, Andrew Sandoval was sort of the first choice, but then he was with Bobby Hort. And I thought, well, what kind of Rachel and Rob, they're Monkees fans. So I asked them to do it. Here they are. And we got the questions in the email that people have sent over time, and Rob and I and Rachel curated it all. So we're not going to get to all your questions. How's that sound? We'll start with that, and we'll go on to the fact that. But we did sweep them together so that we can tell, give answers to some broader questions. And I'm going to let Rob and Rachel lead it, but I'm going to ask them some questions too, because aside from being two of the smartest people I know, they're also totally dialed, avid Monkees fans. And so they don't know a lot of minutia, but they know a lot of stuff. So we'll figure this out. So you got some questions there, I think, don't you?
Yeah, so I have here on my phone some of the questions that we all selected that were more representative of what everybody asked. And again, I want to thank everybody who submitted questions and to let you know that every question was read. And we wish we had time to address all of them. I'll start with, I hope I'm pronouncing this right, Aaliyah Wilson asked the question, what do you think about having teenager fans again?
Teenager?
Fans, Monkees fans.
Oh. One can. There she is. Well, I don't really think much about the age of fans. I think more about the heart and more about who you are and the way that we connect. And there's some lame-o teenagers, just like lame-o adults, but there are also some just beautifully smart and focused. And the thing that appeals, it seems to me, about the fans that I know is that everybody's pretty much on the same page about the Monkees. They all have this moment, this gem that they polish off that has to do with this moment in childhood, like you guys both have told me. And it's no different for a teenager than it is for us old guys. It's that same extraordinary moment where you look at the television and it's coming up and you think, is that possible? Could I do that? Can I be that? Could I be a part of that? And it's ageless. So it doesn't mean you do it. I don't care about how old somebody is. I mean, look, if you're 306, you should probably go, explain to me how you did that. And if you're 4, then, come and sit on my lap, we'll talk. But anything in between is just all, sweetness and light in my estimation. What else we got?
All right. Deborah Estes asks, my question is, if you did not end up doing music and getting involved with the Monkees TV show, what do you think you would have done instead? Was there a plan B?
No, I never planned on getting involved with the show. It was not a plan at all. I fell backwards into the whole thing, as most of you know. I mean, I started off performing, and then I started playing guitar and singing around, and I ended up getting a job on the show, and but it always seemed right. It never felt like I would have ever done anything different.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Where are you? Is that you in the red?
Yes.
Okay, yeah.
Right.
Is that a good answer?
Yes.
Okay, I see you recorded it on your iPad. I expect to see that on YouTube.
Okay, I've given myself a challenging name, so if you're here, please correct me. Jerry Thomas says, Tomaszewski.
Oh, you're here, hey. Hi, Jerry.
It's a simple question, but one we're all curious about. What music do you listen to these days?
Well, it's sort of the same music I've always listened to, which is, it's eclectic. It's as broad as it is long. I listen to anything that stirs me, anything that gives me an uplift. I tend to not brood. I tend to not be dark. I tend to not enjoy somber or, you know those 99 songs that are the most relaxing songs that you can get from Amazon for like $1.50? Yeah. You know what I'm talking about? Well, anyway, there's just, you can go to on Amazon, it's a 90 world's most relaxing songs, 99 most relaxing songs, $1.50, it's an MP3 download. Well, they're Gregorian chants. Nothing relaxing. So I don't tend to do that. And I also don't tend to be manic, but I do love teen angst, which means I love, ZZ Top in the day, and hard country blues and those blues singers. And who's doing that now? You know, there's some people who are just knocking it back today, still do the same thing. But I can't tell you who it is, just uplifting and brighten my day. I dance around the kitchen in my underwear. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'm glad you appreciate that. You would if you saw it, but
Tony Catania asks, so why now? Why after all this time did you come full circle and embrace the Monkees again?
well, I haven't come full circle because I never didn't embrace them. I was always, but as most of you probably know if you followed it, early, like 1969, the paths diverged. The show came to a stop, Peter quit, and we all sort of, well, what are we going to do now? And Mickey and Peter and I thought, we'll go out with an R&B band. I was like, yeah, that's an interesting idea. And so I did a little bit of that, but then what I wanted to do was get my country stuff and the songs that I was writing, there wasn't any real place for my songs in the Monkees, and so they didn't get recorded. You guys know 2 or 3 of them, but you don't know, I have a body of work that's half a century long. And so I wanted to play that, so I did the first national bands, and then from there it rolled out into more and more stuff. But never did my love for the Monkees and love for Mickey and Peter and David diminish. I mean, it was fun, it was great, I had it as part of my life. And it wasn't, I went out with the guys 2 or 3 times, because they had a very active career performing as the Monkees. But I was busy too. I was making movies and doing stuff that we just constantly had schedule conflicts. And then towards the end, just before Davey died, I got, we started talking again. Let's go back out, let's go back out. And then of course we lost Davey. And then, so Mickey and Peter and I thought, well, we should probably do this now and really get out there. And, who knows where this is going. I said, yeah, I'm down for that. So that's how it started. And then just at the same time, I got this call from people in London that said, will you come over and play some dates? I said, sure. So my solo career started up at the same time, and it was just a kind of a logic of events, just natural. But it was never a lapse in my affection and my love of the Monkees and where it fits in my life. It was always the same, and it still is. I mean, I feel exactly the way about it now that I felt about it then, which is to say ambivalent. No, that's a joke. No, I appreciate it. Never left it. There you go. Take it to the bank.
Okay. I'm really curious about this one myself. It's submitted from Suzanne Perdue. It's a 2-part question, but related. What is your favorite Monkees episode, and what was the most fun one to film?
They're both the same as both the Princess, the fairy tale. Well, there was a couple of reasons for it. There was an absurdism that set in with the Monkees shows. And there was nobody who really just designed those things. They just sort of happened. And the fairy tale it depended a lot on some extemporaneous and spontaneous kind of riffing between the four of us, which we always had fun doing. And I realized, you know, I could play this thing in drag. That would be fun. I could go into this girl and become a princess. I was a complete problem. And I just thought, I can't pass this up. And also the fact that I fell in love with myself. That was fun. And then the way it came out, it was just good. It was absurdist and it was a good comic riff. I thought it was, I didn't think it was the best Monkees episode, but in terms of what was my favorite, that was it.
I think, you know, looking over the other questions, I think they're all a little broader and deeper in things that we're going to be touching on in the Q&A. So maybe.
Yeah, but I got some questions I got to ask you guys. Do you mind if I ask you some questions? No, seriously, because tell me the moment that you became a fan of the Monkees. I mean, both of you are very astute. Both of you are highly skilled critical thinkers. And you're not going to, well, I'm assuming here, but I have never seen you or known you two or seen in any of your writings that you just wander along with the crowd. You don't tend to get swept up in fandom. I mean, I know you get excited about stuff, but I never see it in the magazine. It's so clear-eyed and so even-handed. So, how did you get caught up in them? Not caught up, that's the wrong word. What brought you to the Monkees? What brought you to the Monkees? You go first, Rob. Go, yeah.
That's a Rachel. But yeah, I guess like you talk about not being swept along with the crowd. I feel like I was kind of swept along with the crowd. I had this idea that the Monkees were like, oh, they're like an imitation Beatles or whatever. They're not a real band. And like I sort of like didn't really listen to it growing up as a little kid and didn't have much exposure to it as a really young kid. And then when I did, I had in my mind that like, oh, this is like forbidden material in some way. It's like somehow occulted by this like sense that it's somehow like a thing that like was like I've heard like negative things about it. I've heard like skepticism about it. And then
Yeah, you don't,
it.
yeah, right.
And then I just loved it. I mean, I just couldn't understand how like what I was seeing and what I was hearing, you know, lined up with the stuff that I had heard and read about in like magazines or whatever. It's kind of absorbed from like being someone who's into music as a young kid and wanting to read about like, you know, reading Rolling Stone or wherever I was going to read things about music, just catch as catch can. So I had this sense that like, wait, this is something that like is not about that. It's not like they're like where I thought I was like being somehow smart by kind of accepting this opinion that I didn't really have any basis for. All of a sudden I had an opportunity to reverse that and have like a different opinion about things and kind of like trust the opinion that I was feeling responding to the music, responding to the show. And then that's sort of like what got me started, and then it sort of like had its moment where it kind of came back onto television. It was on MTV, and I was like really into MTV as a music kid, and then like, yes, this is like, now people are starting to legitimate an opinion that I had that was private, and that was my kind of thing, and I felt like kind of redeemed in a way, and that sort of like accelerated the sort of fandom for me.
Cool.
For me, it was, I had two older brothers, they're quite a bit older than me. I actually don't know exactly how much, I'm not going to do the math live on stage. They were out of the military when I was 6, so that's the age difference. And one of them, they were both, I would say they're both snobs. They grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico. They were both like the coolest guys. They knew about everything. One of them in particular was in a lot of, you know, locally cool punk bands, and they just were encyclopedic about their knowledge of music, and to this day there's nobody I respect the taste of more. And their favorite band, they both agree, is the Monkees. And I grew up, you know, they would, I was this fat little kid, and they would pick me up from school, take me to the donut shop and hold a donut over my head while I would go out and I'd jump. And they'd say, like, their test for me when I was really little, and they were going to teach me about what matters in the world, is name all of the Monkees in order of importance. And I mean, like, you know, I might get crucified decide out here later, but whatever. This is what I was indoctrinated with. It was Nez, Torque, Dolan's, Jones, and I had to. And it was just like that was like automatic to answer. And then later in life, I think a lot of it was about I was trying to understand my brothers. I was like I really wanted to be close to them and know. I mean, I grew up with the music and I loved it, but then in college, I took a course in feminist avant-garde cinema, and I wrote my final paper about Head, and I began to theorize. I began to theorize the Monkees and think about, like what about the Monkees is symbolically important to me, like what the spirit of it is, the adversarial spirit, the sort of siding with the children over adults, sort of at every turn, and never ending in that quest. That's something that I identify with deeply, and I think that it makes a lot of sense now looking back that Rob and I would have met and connected, and then Nez and Winky would have connected because there's very much a spirit, an ethic of the Monkees that I believe in quite ardently. Actually, beyond fandom and into something much deeper.
That's great. Oh wait, before the war down on this thing, you said you just tossed off the fact that you wrote your thesis on the Head. Help us, because nobody in this room besides you obviously understands Head. So lead us, Rachel. Lead us. Tell us what the hell.
We watched Head before coming out here, and I was trying to find it, and I was like, what did I say, And we had all these. I mean, I think that our takeaway from it was, on some level, it's about the film is about agency. It's about the sort of impossibility of freedom, and that not just for the Monkees, but for all people. At the time, I wrote about how that what I learned about feminist avant-garde filmmaking tactics of sort of, I'm not going to ramble on forever, but about, it's about the male gaze and sort of thwarting it and subverting it. And I think what's interesting about the Monkees is that in that film, a lot of the tactics that's typical of avant-garde filmmakers from a feminist perspective was employed in the Monkees to thwart the gaze of the original Monkees fans. It was about complicating and subverting the Monkees fan gaze and sort of possibly setting out in, kind of cleaning the palette for something new, but then of course it ends in the black box. So it's a very readable film. It's a very complicated film. It's sort of, it's upsetting, but it's also, it's compulsively watchable.
It is watchable, I have to say. I can't take my eyes off of Davey.
What do you think about Head?
Well, I was going to, I'm sincere in that I don't really quite understand, but you see, I was swept on in something. Everybody in this room has to understand that I never saw the Monkees. I have no idea what it would be like to be a Monkees fan or part. I just don't know. Any more than Jimi Hendrix ever saw Jimi Hendrix live. I did, and I knew more than he did about that experience. But if I think about Head, and I think about the movie Zim, and this I wanted to ask you about this, I need some water, was in today's internet environment, in the media environment, is there anything like this that's going on? Or is this thing going to transfer forward? What is the dynamic? Because what you're talking about in Head, oh, thanks. Thank you, sir. There was something in that movie that you position academically and correctly. I agree with it. But there's something in it very heartfelt that was in the show. And is there anything like that in the contemporary media, in the internet, in what do I call it? Today? I mean, is there anything like that that's a bookend to it, or uses the same dynamic that was there?
Well, I mean, I think of it in the broad sense that, sort of the dilemma of, the Monkees in Head. They're kind of scripted into the situation that they're trying to break the script constantly. They're tearing down the sets, and they're kind of going off script and kind of talking to the cameraman. They're trying to break the fourth wall of this thing that they're in to kind of demonstrate that we're free people, we can make our own choices. But then then the film swallows them up again, and they're still back in the scripted reality. And I feel like living in a world where it's sort of like we're under surveillance in lots of different ways, by our own choices, by using our phones and by being on social media and using Facebook and all those things, like we're kind of like following down the path towards sort of, being in that situation ourselves, and sort of as a society, where like we kind of like try to reenact our free will, but then we reinscribe ourselves within Facebook or within social media, and we're just like, oh, we're trapped in this thing, and like people are telling us who we are. We don't get to say who we are to them.
Well, but are the Monkees, so the Monkees represented a sort of freedom from that? Because that's the word you use, Rachel.
Yeah, well, it's about the sort of, my interpretation is that it's about the sort of the gestures toward freedom and the foreclosures of freedom. That the Monkees was never, the Monkees is that film, and the Monkees in general, is a much more sophisticated document than I think it's ever been fully recognized by, mainstream critics and by the mainstream at large. So I think that, I agree with Rob that in some ways the Monkees are more relevant than ever. In a sense, there's, I don't, and to answer your question in terms of there being a thing like the Monkees that isn't all of us, right? That isn't all people in society. I don't think there is, because I think one of the things that's so engaging and interesting about the Monkees is that it was the first time that this kind of collapse of identity and collapse of media took place in one space, and that space was the Monkees. And on some level, it was like, oh, four insane boys, try out for this thing, and you couldn't have known that what was about to happen was, that identity could be sort of, you would have your celebrity identity be mistaken for the characters you play, the television show, and the music, sort of having these tensions between the two. I think it's a bottomless depth of analysis that we could give, and I want to know, one question I have, and one thing that I've always thought about when I watch the Monkees is that I think it's a very critical show. On one level, it's very, warm and friendly, kid friendly, but it's also a very adversarial show. It's also a show that is against something.
Well, Robert Rafelson, said on several occasions, he said this on a commentary on some of the shows, that he thought it was sort of anti-capitalist. I think that was more Rafelson than it was anything else. The thing that I go back at, and because I was just a cog in this wheel, was how collaborative it all was, and how important the collaboration was. When we did the first shows, I remember that somebody said, "Oh, we didn't shoot enough footage," and our editor, Jerry Shepard, just sort of cut and pasted real quick because I had to deliver to the thing, and that from that was born the whole kind of crazy style of it. Now, it's true that Rafelson had gone, after Richard Lester's dynamic in Hard Day's Night. That was an homage. The Monkees' whole thing was an homage to that. But still, there was this moment where it just sort of came out of nowhere, and it was. If you tried to go back and figure out, okay, is this point of view an adversarial point of view? Is this a feminist point of view? What are these guys up to? The answer was, hey, it's me. And yet, on the wall was, did you show me the picture at dinner last night about money is the root of all evil?
Yeah.
I'd forgotten about that.
It's one of the first shots in the show.
It is one of the first shots in the show? Well, you guys never told me that. I can't remember what was on that set. We tried to rebuild that set when we did the special in '97, but we couldn't find all the pieces. They were all gone. Anyway, blah, 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 blah.
I'm curious about the sort of behind the scenes also, just in terms of building upon this. Maybe there wasn't a set ideological agenda of the Monkees to be subversive or adversarial in this way, and yet on the same Rafelson commentary that you're referring to, he talks about how one of the strategies the Monkees used was always to use first-time directors, because first-time directors had no sense of rules, and so they could just do
Well, yeah, but you can look at that as two ways. You can look at that as kind of anarchistic or as ignorant. You know? There are some rules to filmmaking.
Yeah, but I wonder, do you think like sort of the Monkees whole project, and the sort of not knowing what you're doing, right? The sort of like the sort of madness of the project. How do you see that in retrospect as being, formative to what the Monkees was? How much of it were you really in control of?
Well, my gut reaction to that is none, zero. But I think at times, I would have fights. I would have these notorious fights around because I was trying to figure out a lot of what was going on. A lot of it had to do with the music, because the music was a critical path to me. I thought, you cannot do this show with 1960s sensibility, Hollywood commercials as the music bed. Not in the age of the Beatles. And for me, not in the age of rock and roll and not in the age of Texas blues. You can't do that. It's got to be real. Now, Kirshner, who was a fierce adversary to me, and I was to him, he was an excellent songcrafter, pop songcrafter, and he put himself in a position of saying, I want to control the music here, and I want this to be done a certain way. And for the most part, he was right. He got Tommy and Bobby involved. He got Jerry Gold and Carole King. He got Larry Mann, Cynthia Wild, Neil Diamond, and so forth. And he did a wonderful job of those early records. I think they're some of the best pop songs ever. But at the end of the day, the more I pushed against Don, and the more he pushed back, the more I realized, I'm not pushing against anything here. This guy doesn't have any control. None of us have any control. The producers don't have control. The editor doesn't have any control. So does it mean it's out of control? Well, it was under the control of something. And whatever it was under the control of then, it's under the control of now. And I suspect, not being a Monkees fan, I suspect that is a common bond we all share. That there's something that made that thing happen and pop in and work that lives with us all forever. Now, the fact that it happened at, some critical prepubescent time, I think, is salient and is important, and you got to look at it. But that bores the hell out of me, and so I just don't think about it. I think, well, okay, that's probably true. But at the end of the day, didn't I just say end of the day? Okay, well, that's the end of the day. Over. Done.
Question to Rob, but I want him to ask whatever question he wants, but just can't help myself just sort of jumping off on what you just responded to. There's something very spiritual about your outlook, Matt. It's like you have a sort of wisdom that is, it's spontaneous, but it's highly informed. You're sort of driven by something. And I'm wondering, to take it all the way back to your childhood, how much of this has been with you your whole life since, living with your mother, and, what is your relationship to spirituality via being raised Christian Science and, wherever you are today?
Well, it's a fair question. I was raised in a regimen of radical metaphysics, which, for a 3-year-old, it's a lot to swallow. But my mother was inspired by something, and she taught me certain things from that inspiration. I was inspired along certain lines that I learned that were spiritual. And what I mean by spirit is I'm talking about an infinite idea, the same spirit that governs the idea of numbers and notes and color. The spiritual sense of the number 2 is not confined to the mark that makes the number 2. We all understand that, and we deal with it routinely. We deal with these ideas, these infinite ideas. So spiritually, it was my approach to everything. It was my approach to the Monkees. Now, I'm going to come back to the music. When I was, 9 years old, I don't know, just tiny, I would see people play musical instruments. One particular guy played the organ in a music store. And he played things like Tico Tico and Frenesy and stuff like that. And I thought, that is the coolest thing I ever heard, because I was 9. It's the coolest thing I ever heard. How is he doing that with his thinking? He's obviously not doing it with his body. He's making his body do it. How does he do that? That's cool. Well, I found out that there were certain kinds of music and certain sorts of things that happened that were inspiring on that level, and that made it well up in me. And so the music that was in the Monkees, I approached spiritually. I approached, does it inspire? Does it make things happen inside me? And had I not been quite so adversarial to Don Kirshner, I think I could have understood more what he was after. But I was fighting for something. I was fighting for a basic roots kind of music. And Don was fighting for pop music. He said, no, you don't do pop music, you do it this way. And so I never quite got completely grounded inside the Monkees music the way I wanted to. But I did get something out of it that was deeply spiritual and deeply meaningful to me. And the same thing happened with the storylines and so forth. I thought, this is a little shallow, boys. And it's like, no, it's not that shallow, it's fun. Don't go, don't get so, don't get your britches up your legs so far. Just hang out with it and have a good time. And I think, yeah, there's something to that. And as I've gotten older, that's informed it more and more and more, because in this spiritual sense, while it was is precise, and while it's a beautiful, it provides me with a beautiful access to ideas, it also has a gentle, loving kindness to it that's just easy. Just take it easy. And so there was something about that with the Monkees too. They were frantic and raucous, but they were not manic. There was an easygoing kind of, we can all make this work. What?
Yeah, there's a trust in the sort of subservientness, let's throw everything at the wall and see what sticks.
Yeah.
Let's let these techniques be employed without really necessarily testing them with an audience or proving that this will somehow be, give 10,000 more laughs than this other way of doing it. It's like you get the sense that there's an experimentation, there's a trust in you just being allowed to go within the loosest sort of construct. And I don't know, that spirit carries through, and I think that it always strikes me as interesting that there's that happening at the same time you're having these battles for control that are sort of overriding the thing or kind of blending with the thing. I think it can be so kind of chill at the same time that there's the same kind of tension.
Well, and what I'll say in closing, is that overriding spirit of the easygoing is what has pervaded, persisted, is perpetual, and is here now. That's what's going on. It's just this is a good time. That's it, guys. Thanks, Rachel. Thanks, Rob. Good night. See you around.